Hi everyone, my name is Bryce Roberts. I'm an undergraduate biology student in my last semester here at the University of New Mexico. I completed this research under the guidance of Dvorka Gulasija in her Computational Genetics and Evolution lab as a part of my thesis. This study is titled, "The Storage Effect Promotes Persistence in Natural Populations in Hostile Habitats." To begin with an overview of my research question, we start by asking what forces enable population persistence during continuous change in the environment. A population can be said to persist when they resist harsh fluctuations in the environment. These changes are what we consider as hostile habitats. Classically, mutation has been considered the only method that would allow a population to resist these fluctuations and therefore persist. The genetic diversity derived from mutation allows for adaptation. Thus, a population is somewhat buffered from changes in the environment. But mutation is very rare, and they're also not always adaptive. So we extend a model in natural populations to provide evidence of persistence under storage effects. And this is an effect that would promote diversity independent of mutation. So what is the storage effect? Well, it's a mechanism of coexistence that we use to explain how diversity is maintained within a population. And this genetic diversity is comprised of heterozygous alleles, where the probability of picking out two alleles from a population and them being different is higher compared to having no diversity and picking out two alleles and there being no change. So how does the storage effect occur? It's enabled when an allele that is better suited for the current state of the environment is selected for based on its greater reproductive success. And once it's selected for heavily, even after conditions are no longer favorable, it's maintained in the population. And so this diversity in selection allows for adaptation to occur. We suggest that it's more plausible that the storage effect helps promote the persistence during harsh environmental changes compared to mutation alone, because genes that have previously been good are immediately available, and we don't have to wait for good mutations to save a population. And so here is an illustration to represent the effects of the storage effect, with fluctuations being change in season on a winter and summer allele. In the top panel here, I show a population without the storage effect, and in the bottom panel, a population with the storage effect. And so we can see here in the summer that the summer allele is maintained without the storage effect, but the winter allele is not. And so once we shift from the summer to the winter, we see that the population size has shrunk because we don't maintain alleles that are not favored without the storage effect. And so we see that the population slowly comes to extinction. With the storage effect, even in the summer when the winter allele is not favored, it's still maintained in the population. So the population is going to keep constant size and it's going to be able to persist. Continuing with some background, the objective of our study was to show that the storage effect does in fact enable a population to persist during environmental change. Previously, models only addressed the storage effect under exponential population size. And these are where changes in population don't reflect what happens in nature. And under exponential population growth, you can't analyze persistence and extinction because populations are maintained for such long periods of time. So we study logarithmic population growth as occurs in nature, where a population has a carrying capacity because of limited resources and space. And we model the storage effect in a population that is exposed to various selective pressures under a forward in time simulation. And so here a population is subdivided into two subpopulations, and it goes through steps of migration, selection, and reproduction. And here we show subpopulation 1 and subpopulation 2. And these are going to illustrate our three major model parameters. So P here is phase, and it's the number of generations across the sign cycle. S max is the magnitude of selective pressure, and we can think of this as our environmental change. And M is the number of migrants that a population can exchange when it's at the optimum population size. So interactions between these parameters will tell us whether the storage effect works as proposed. So the way that we quantify the storage effect is through two variables. Equilibrium, which is given by E, is going to test whether a population has stability in number of individuals. So when the number of individuals is able to oscillate around a constant number, this means that it's resisting fluctuations in the environment. We also measure the genetic diversity present in our model by HL, and this is where diversity can tell us if the storage effect is working in our population. So in our control, we withhold the storage effect, and it's given by EN and HLN. And our experimental model is under the storage effect, given by ES and HLS. And we continue by simply discussing the results, first taking a look at our baseline model. Here we demonstrate equilibrium without the storage effect, and each box is representing one combination of our three variables. There's 85 here total. So equilibrium levels decrease as M, S max, and P get smaller. And this is seen in the white boxes where there is no equilibrium. But we also see that there's some replicate parameters that are able to reach an equilibrium. And this is because high migration rates allowed diversity to keep a population at equilibrium. Next, we'll compare our baseline model to our full model under the storage effect. And so here, this chart is actually showing our equilibrium under the storage effect over equilibrium with no storage effect, and we see this function here. And so this is going to allow us to evaluate the actual change between the two. And we actually are going to change it a bit. And with these plus signs, we show where equilibrium previously occurred with no storage effect. And this is pretty much showing that there's a wide range of conditions under the storage effect where we're allowing a population to be at equilibrium. And we see that the boxes are white. There was very little migration, so we were not able to store diversity, and conditions were also very harsh. And ultimately, we see that 60% of cases significantly improved versus conditions without storage effect. And now we'll evaluate diversity. And for our baseline model, we actually don't have to look at it because diversity is only a proxy for the storage effect. And since our control did not allow mutation, we know that it's monomorphic, meaning it has no diversity. And so we'll go right into our full experimental model. We see here that cumulative diversity under the storage effect is graphed against equilibria. So when HLS is high, it's significant because it implies that a sizable proportion of alleles avoided extinction, and high being everything above 2. So at this graph, we see that HLS is increasing along the x-axis, or excuse me, the y-axis, and it increases with equilibrium on the x-axis. So in essence, this is the storage effect at work in our population because increased genetic diversity is contributing to increased equilibrium across replicate runs. So we supported that populations found equilibria at higher rates and were kept more stable under the storage effect. And then we showed that diversity levels increase when equilibrium is higher. Thus, a relationship with diversity and a high proportion of equilibria was shown, and this directly supports our hypothesis. And to introduce some limitations, we did cover a vast array of parameters to offer the best look at a natural population, but we could have benefited from a mathematical analysis of stability. And so this is called a stability analysis. And this offers a perspective on equilibria where we evaluate the strength of our equilibria. And we know that our populations are currently at a stable state, but we don't know how strong that stable state is. So what a stability analysis does is present it with further change. And so this would help us see the extent of control that the storage effect has on these populations. And to conclude, We offer a framework that must be expanded on before we judge the extent on which the storage effect may lead to a population's evolutionary rescue. But we show that it's plausible that the storage effect contributes to persistence of natural populations in hostile habitats. And for some acknowledgements, I'd like to thank Dr. Glasija and members of our lab, Carsey over at UNM with help for simulations, and New Mexico A&P with funding that allowed me to do this research. If you have any questions, feel free to direct them to my email. I'd be happy to continue the conversation, but thank you for listening.